So I've decided to take the political compass test on video for my own future reference and for other people who might want to know my answers and detailed responses to some of these questions. I'm not expecting anyone to watch this, honestly. So this test is... I don't really like this test all that much because I think it's a bit biased, and I'll point that out as I go along, but it's also more Britain-centric because I think the test is actually from Britain. I could be wrong on that. But, right, so I'm going to begin. So the first question: if economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interests of transnational corporations. Now, this is one of the biased questions, I think. The sort of starting principles that they go with are economic globalization is inevitable, and that primarily serving the interests of humanity, whatever that might mean, is in opposition to the interests of transnational corporations, which it might be, but it seems to have a left-wing bias in that it regards corporations as some force that is completely unconnected to the actual people that they serve or the people that buy products from them. So I'm just gonna say I agree with the general concept, but I can't strongly agree because the question is worded in a strange way. I'd always support my country whether it was right or wrong. No, that's not a good thing to do. If my country started invading other countries, like say we invaded Canada or something, then that would obviously be something I would oppose. Bad idea, because you don't want to have that follow the leader mentality. You want to be an individual and think individually. No one chooses his country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. I disagree with this because it would sort of depend on the country, actually, because if you're born in, I don't know, Zimbabwe or Ethiopia, there's really not much to be proud of. But in a Western country like the United States, you know, we have a long-standing tradition, like an intellectual tradition in the United States, and a lot to be proud of. You know, I agree with the principles of the founding fathers and all that. So we have a pretty rich history here in the United States, for one, which I could be proud of. But in other countries that haven't done as well, they might have a rich history, but it hasn't really contributed to the success of the nation in the present. Then I can see not being proud of that nation because of its unsuccessfulness. But I disagree on the premise that people being proud of their country necessarily isn't necessarily because they're proud of their country. It's because they're proud of their country for producing them, generally, or for being successful enough to produce them. Our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. I would say, well, different races have different qualities, I guess, because if you watch the Olympics, then there are no white guys winning the 100-meter dash or whatever. It's all black people, but there's no black people winning the swimming competition. So, you know, it's sort of a toss-up. I think different races have different physical and, I guess, mental qualities that define them in certain ways, but no race is superior to any other, I don't think, on the face of it, so I'm going to disagree. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. I guess it depends on the context, but generally no. Well, maybe yes. I'm thinking of World War II. Like the enemy of our enemy would be the Soviet Union, but they're not necessarily our friend because, well, they're our friend within the context of defeating Germany, but not in the long term, because they were a horrible regime. So I would say disagree. with that one. Military action that justifies that defies international law is sometimes justified. Well, it would depend on the circumstance. A lot of these questions aren't specific, and I find myself saying, well, it would depend on the X, or, the context for a lot of them, but I guess you're supposed to answer in a general sense. So I would say it is sometimes justified, because it didn't say always justified, it just says sometimes. So I could contrive of an example where it might be sometimes justified. There's no worrying fusion of information and entertainment. I would say I agree with that, because you don't really know whether the information you're getting is accurate while you're being entertained. You just might take it on face value without researching, and the people who are dishing out possible lies can just hide under the sort of protection of, well, it's just entertainment. I don't know. I guess I agree with that. Of course, in the past you'd have to rely on mass media and things like that to get your information, but I think, whatever. Next page. Okay, so the economy. People are ultimately divided more by class than nationality. No, that's retarded. Marx thought that, the English people would be all about communism, but obviously they weren't, because, England was essentially his framework for writing the Communist Manifesto. If you think about it, you could think of the Victorian England, the rich capitalists, the bourgeois exploiting the proles, in the factories and all that. But the English identified more with their own aristocracy than with the proletariat of other nations. So I would think it's pretty dumb to suggest that the poor in England, Sudan, India, and Japan are all connected in sort of a proletarian solidarity. That's just dumb. Well, the rich, on the other hand, you might be able to say that for the rich, because, the rich all wear suits and drink champagne and drive expensive cars, and I think rich culture is not as different as poor culture when you look at different nationalities, but I think people are ultimately more divided by, nationality and religion, culture, those sorts of things, and just how much money they have. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment. I would say yes. In fact, yeah, I would just say yes. In some circumstances, inflation and unemployment are connected, and doing one thing might cause both of them to go up or down together. Like, for example, raising or lowering the minimum wage. Raising it would cause more inflation and decrease employment. That's just one example. But I think inflation is more important than the unemployment rate altogether, because it's the health of your economy, I would say. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. Well, generally speaking, not really. Because, well, with the carbon output, I would say yes, but if you think about the corporations controlling. So, if you have a wheat field and the farmer is tending to the wheat field, the farmer wouldn't just burn down all of his wheat for no reason. It's in his interest to keep the wheat field. By the same token, if you have a lumberjack who's cutting down trees in a forest, he wouldn't just cut down the entire forest, right? They do replant the trees at a similar rate as they're cutting them down, because what would be the use of eliminating the entire forest? And then you'd have to, I don't know, go on to the next one. Generally doesn't help you. But in the case of carbon output, you couldn't really regulate that, because then we wouldn't have electricity. And switching to nuclear or whatever is pretty expensive. So I would say disagree. From each according to his ability, to each according to his need is a fundamentally good idea. No, strongly disagree. I'm not a commie. Um, it this is fundamentally in opposition to meritocracy because it says, oh well, if someone needs this amount of food and this amount of shelter, well, we give it to them and they get nothing more and nothing less. Well, no, I'm sorry, but if I work hard enough to be able to earn more food or more shelter or less food or shelter than I need, then that's a more efficient way of running society. And more pro-freedom, by the way. It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product. I don't think it's a sad reflection. If people, I don't think it would exist, or it wouldn't exist, if people didn't want it. If there was no demand for bottled water, then why would anyone produce it? So, I would say disagree. And you could make like a commentary on human nature to say, well, the fact that this exists, it says something negative about human nature. I don't really think so though, but there's a demand for it, so I don't think it's a sad thing really. Land shouldn't be a commodity to be bought and sold. No, strongly disagree. If you can buy or sell something, then what's to stop you from buying or selling it? Unless it's like child slavery and it's unethical or something. But I don't see anything inherently unethical in buying or selling land. It is regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. No, I'm gonna strongly disagree. If there's a demand for, I guess they're talking about like hedge fund managers or stockbrokers. If there's a demand for that and people will pay you for doing it, then it's not regrettable. It's just market forces that exists. So I don't see any way to cut that out of the system unless we're going to go full communist or something. Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. Well, I'm not for unrestricted free trade globally necessarily, so it is sometimes necessary, but it's not something that should be done all the time. If there's a good reason for protectionism, I'm not against it. Like, I guess the whole deal with Trump and the Chinese, what's that called? The TTP, that's probably not a good idea because it would just give China an unfair advantage and things like that. But I don't really know a lot about that, so I should probably shut up. The only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver a profit to its shareholders. Well, that is factually the only social responsibility of a company, but I guess the question is, should it be? I guess not. A company should do charitable things and help the community like that. So I would say disagree just because it says should, but I mean I wouldn't force the company to have any other purpose than what it's obligated to do. So I guess I would disagree with a proviso. The rich are too highly taxed. Absolutely. You have no financial incentive to get rich if the rich are taxed at a high rate, and that's just bad economically. And I don't see the moral premise for taxing the rich at such a high rate. I'm not for a progressive tax because I think it's unfairly treating people based on their economic status. Those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care. Strongly agree. It's actually abhorrent that some countries limit the standards of medical care that some people can buy. I think the Canadian Human Rights Council actually deemed it a human rights abuse to not let people buy commercial healthcare if they have enough money to, and if they want to, because their healthcare system is so bad that that it makes people wait months or years for essential surgery and then they die, or the government doesn't have enough money to keep cancer patients alive, so they just pull the plug. That's just horrible. I'm really against universal health care, just on the premise of it. Governments should penalize businesses that mislead the public. I guess they're talking about false advertising, um, but it's not necessarily the government doing it. It's more the people suing the companies for false advertising. But I guess the fact that it's just a crime means that the government is doing it. So I would agree. A genuine free market requires restrictions on the ability of predator multinationals to create monopolies. Well, I'm thinking of two sort of different examples of a monopoly. One would be the classic Standard Oil, the David Rockefeller. You know, he I don't was it David, or it was one Rockefeller. I forget the first name, but they basically had a market share on basically the entire market in oil, and from the from drilling the oil out of the ground to it being in people's cars was controlled by one company, which was Standard Oil. So basically, they bought out all the train lines that they needed, they bought out the refineries, they bought out the gas stations, pretty much everything. And then they could raise the price of oil as they saw fit, and then influence politics, and it was just a bad scenario. So I think antitrust laws are generally justified. So I would agree. But on the flip side, I'm told by various people that I think it was AT&T. I'm not precisely sure in which company exactly, but it was one phone company that basically had a monopoly over the phone business, and I'm told that the phone service was better back then, even. So I don't know. I don't see any reason why the monopoly would improve the market, but I do see reasons why it could damage it. So I'm gonna go agree. The freer the market, the freer the people. In a general sense, that is correct. In nations that don't prioritize a free market, the people are invariably not free, and the freer you are to use your money as you see fit, the freer you are all around, because you need money to do basically everything. And if the government limits your ability to act willingly in the market, then they're limiting other freedoms. So I would say yes, strongly agree. Abortion, when the woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal. I've always been kind of conflicted on abortion. I would say it shouldn't always be illegal, but I do think abortion is immoral. Um, it all depends on whether you think the fetus is a human life or not, and that's kind of subjective as it stands. I would just say disagree for the sake of it. All authority should be questioned. Strongly agree. If and it not only questioned but justified. If you can't justify an authority, then you should seriously question whether it should exist or not. And authority can be justified. Like, I think government authority in the general sense can be justified, because without it there would be chaos, and another government would invariably spring up. That's the problem with anarcho-capitalism. Anyway, so yes, strongly agree. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. This is very vague. I don't really know what they're trying to get at here, but if they're talking about laws and criminal justice, if you if you steal something from me, then I steal something from you. That's not really how that's not really the modern conception of justice. So I would say disagree. Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters or museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. I would say, before last December, I would say agree, but after visiting the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City, it's very valuable to maintain a way of connecting to earlier cultures and history. And if the public, if that fell out of favor as a fad, if just museums or theaters fell out of favor and shut down, then we would lose something very valuable to civilization. And I think that shouldn't really happen. And I don't think museums are that expensive to keep open anyway when you're thinking of the grand scale of government budgets, so I would just I would say disagree actually. Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory. That's just nonsense. What's the purpose of a school then? All people have their rights, but it is better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. Not really, no. Well, I guess they're talking about race because that's kind of what you would be expected to infer, but if they're talking about people of certain ideologies, well, that would also be disagree because if someone has a dumb political stance, then talking to them is the best way to convince them otherwise. So I guess I would disagree in all respects with that. Good parents sometimes have to spank their children. Yeah, I agree. Children do not listen to reason. That's not something they're capable of at their young age, so if you can't reason with them, if they're doing something very horrible, then the other way to condition them, in a sort of a Pavlovian sense, is to either carrot or stick them, and sticking them is some. I don't mean. Okay. Using the stick in the proverbial sense is sometimes a justified thing to do. And this is not. Don't beat your children, obviously, but um, in like spanking them in moderation is probably justified. It's natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents. I would say agree, yeah. Possessing marijuana for personal use, yeah, strongly agree. I don't think the government should have any say in what you put in your body as long as it's not harming others. The prime function of schooling should be to equip the future generation to find jobs. That is the primary function of schooling. There are secondary and tertiary functions of schooling, which are also pretty important, which is just to educate the populace and enrich them with knowledge, cultural, historical, literary that isn't necessarily technical, but I think the technical part of it, just getting them ready to find jobs, is the most important because that's what our economy is based on. People who have jobs in technical areas. So, yeah, I agree. People with serious inheritable disability. Nope. Strongly disagree. I don't think it's the government's position to tell what sorts of people can reproduce and who can't, unless it's like a massive public safety issue, and I don't think it is really. The most important thing for children to learn is to accept discipline. It's not the most important, but it's an important thing, but that's obviously not the most important thing by miles, so I'm going to disagree. There are no savage and civilized peoples, there are only different cultures. No, strongly disagree. There definitely are savage and civilized peoples. If you just read up on Saudi Arabia, then you'll figure it out pretty quickly. I think Western culture and Western values are the best in the world, pretty much, and this is evidenced by the success of Western nations, I think. I mean, you could say that Japan is pretty successful as well, or other countries like that, and I would give you that. Their cultures are pretty hardworking, pretty good as well, but on for the most part, no, I'm not a cultural relativist. Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society support. Agree. Actually, strongly agree. If you're able to work, like, and you don't have any serious like physical limitations, I would say that if you choose not to work, then that's your own economic choice, and no one should be no one should be expected to prop you up in any way. So I would say disagree. I mean, if you were in the war or something and lost an arm and a leg and also was blinded, then there's no other alternative for you but to live off welfare, I guess. But I think most people aren't in that position, and if you're able to work, then you should be economically independent. When you're troubled, it's better not to think about it, but to keep busy with more cheerful things. I'm really not sure what this is asking. This is one of the vague questions where I'm not sure what a right-leaning person would answer. I'm not sure what a libertarian person would answer. I'm not sure what an authoritarian person would answer. I just don't know what they're trying to get out of me. But I would say if you're troubled, it's the best thing for you to do is to deal with the trouble head on. Like if you've been procrastinating in your work, then it's better just to get all your work done. But then again, if it's something you can't remedy with, you know, work or anything like that, if it's like a family member that died, then I would suggest keeping busy with more cheerful things. It depends. So I'm gonna go. I'm just gonna say agree, but I don't know what this is asking me, so I don't really have an opinion on it. First-generation immigrants can never be fully integrated within their new country. I would say it depends on what country they're coming from. If they're coming from the Congo to England or something like that, or to Ireland or the United States, then I would say yes, because the cultures are very different, and it's very hard for them to integrate. And it also depends on the person, but if it's someone going from Austria to Germany or from Canada to the United States, then they speak the same culture and language, and I guess it would be very easy to integrate within the first generation. So I would just say disagree, because I can't do neutral. What's good for the most successful corporations is always ultimately good for all of us. Well, I would say it's the other way around, actually. What's good for all of us is good for the most successful corporations, because if the corporations were offering us things that we didn't want, then they wouldn't exist, and people would stop buying things from them, you know? So I would say agree. It's all market forces. Corporations don't exist independently of the market or of the people. You essentially vote with your money on which corporation you like better, or which products are better that corporations produce. So I would say strongly agree. In support of the free market, of course. No broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding. Agree. Because if you're talking about something, if you're talking about state-run media, then that's just a mouthpiece for the government then, if it's funded by the government. You know, why would the government have any interest in funding something that, you know, that it didn't have any say in? That's just dumb. You know, I don't think things should be mouthpieces for the government. I think the primary purpose of media would be to criticize the government. So, actually strongly agree. Next page. Wider society, okay. Our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. Agree strongly, actually. Hate the Patriot Act, hate the NSA, hate the CIA. They should all die in a hole, or in a fire, I don't know. Basically, yeah, so in my view, the only way the government should be able to get a hold of our private information is if they have a warrant, like the Fourth Amendment says in the Constitution, which is a document that's being neglected by many people these days. A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all the arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system. Strongly disagree. You might say, well, this is technically true, it's just your opinion. Well, the opinion is what's being measured with this test, number one. And number two, I would ask what progress means. I mean, does progress mean, you know, like, going towards every individual having freedom and liberty to do what they want and being, you know, being a just member of society? Or does it mean killing all the Jews? or stealing all the money from the rich people and redistributing it. Like, progress is very subjective, so I would say, no, I don't want progress, I want freedom. I would say strongly disagree. I'm an advocate of a republic, not this. Anyway, although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried. No, strongly disagree. The question you should be asking is if if I am innocent, then why do you have a need to look? Why does the government have a need to look at my information if I am presumed innocent until proven guilty? See, that's the way this works in a Western country, or the way it should work. The death penalty should be an option for the most serious crimes. Yeah, I would say so, because if someone, like, kills 30 or 40 innocent people, if they're a mass murderer, then locking them up is... I don't think... I don't think we need them in society. If they're genuinely crazy, or they just don't have any morals, or they're a psychopath. And then the question always is, well, that's, inhumane. Why should the government have the right to end someone's life? Well, why should the government have the right to lock people in a cage for the rest of their lives? It's the same reason, and in my opinion, I would rather be killed than be locked in a cage for the rest of my life. I think it's more humane to kill me at that point. So yeah, I'm in favor of the death penalty. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. That's probably inevitably what's going to happen, but I don't think it's like a must scenario, as if someone isn't fulfilled or they'll die if they don't have this. So I'm going to say disagree. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art. Disagree. I mean, agree, actually. Postmodernism. Garbage. In some museum, kids, I forget the museum, but there were teenagers who played a prank, and they put a pair of eyeglasses on the floor in the modern art section, and everybody came and lined up and took pictures of it because they thought it was an art piece. So, yeah, pretty much. That's just nonsense. It doesn't represent anything. It's not art, in my opinion. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation. I disagree. If someone's able to be rehabilitated, then they should be. It's a waste of time to try to rehabilitate some criminals. Yeah, that's probably true if they're insane, or they're psychopathic, or they just have a conviction. Or if they're ideologically driven. There are any number of reasons why a criminal can't be rehabilitated. So, in those instances, punishment should be the ultimate goal. But I think generally rehabilitation is the first route to go by. So, the business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer and the artist. I'm conflicted, but I would say this is true, because the business person and manufacturer kind of represent the basic needs of society. You could translate that to the hunter-gatherer and the cave painter, in like a pre-civilization society. Like, you can't have art or literature or music before you have the basic necessities for life. So that's sort of what it's trying to convey, in my opinion, and I would say agree with that. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers. Well, I would say yes. I think males and females have different biological imperatives, as, molded by evolution over millions of years, so I would say that women are more predisposed to being able to take care of children, and men are more predisposed to going out and hunting, which would translate into working in the modern society. But that's not to say I would force anyone to do anything. if a mother wants to be the breadwinner and a father wants to be the caretaker, then obviously they should be able to do that, you know, free of any coercion. But I would say generally, yes, that's the case. Multinational companies are unethically exploiting the plant genetic resources of developing countries. That might be true. I would say Monsanto probably is, but I don't I don't know. I don't know the specifics, and I really haven't read into this, so that's probably true. I'm gonna say yeah. Making peace with the establishment? Nope. Strongly disagree. No. You do not need to make peace with the establishment in order to fulfill your life or be mature. You should always be questioning the establishment at every step of the road, forever. Because if you don't hold power to account, then power will come and bite you in the ass. Next page. Alright, religion. Yeah. Astrology accurately explains many things. Disagree. I know a lot of people who are into astrology, like, oh yeah, I'm a Taurus, I'm a Sagittarius. It's nonsense. You cannot be moral, and it's all coincidence, by the way. If you find that, like, oh well, a Taurus gets angry all the time, and you are a Taurus and you get angry all the time, it's just a coincidence. You cannot be moral without being religious. You can act morally without being religious, so yeah. Like an atheist isn't going to be stopped from rescuing children that are in danger. Like there's no force field preventing him from doing that, obviously. So charity is better than Social Security as a means of helping the. Yeah, I would say so, because charity is voluntary and Social Security is not. Some people are naturally unlucky. No, probably not. It is important that my child's school instills religious values. Probably not. Next page. Sex outside marriage is usually immoral. I don't know. I would, well, I think generally religions have a point when they decry sex outside of marriage, because being monogamous is better for your health and relationships and things like that. But I don't know. I would say disagree, really. A same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. Adoption. I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but disagree. I'll explain, right? So, men and women serve different functions in the caretaking of a child, and biologically, it's impossible to have a child without a man and a woman, right? So I think humans are predisposed, and the sort of the natural state of humans, as determined by evolution, is having a mother and a father, and I think a child is severely disadvantaged if they don't have that. So disagree. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population. Yeah, agree. What goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is no business of the state. Yeah, agree. No one can feel naturally homosexual. Disagree. These days, openness about sex has gone too far. Agree, because I don't think, the common example would be Miley Cyrus on the stage, twerking and things like that. It's not conducive to a functioning society. It's really not something a society that's built to last, has. I don't think, really. I mean, I'm not opposed to changing my mind on this and really everything else in the test. So if you have a reason why I should, then point it out. So let's see where I stand. Yep, right there. So basically, I'm a centrist, libertarian right-winger, right-wing libertarian. Um, Pretty much, yeah. This test, for some reason, this test places me significantly more authoritarian than other tests do. I don't know why. On other tests, I'm usually around here, but on this test, I'm like significantly more authoritarian. But I'm still in the bottom half of the grid, so that's not bad actually. I would say. There it is.